So wonderful to be back here with Creative Live. Today is all about outdoor flash photography. And, outdoor flash photography is somewhat complicated. Some of you have used the outdoor flashes in the outdoors before and you come home with poor results. And so today my purpose today is to help you understand what's going on with ambient light, with flash. I want to simplify everything. I want to show you how to use one flash and use it really well. We've got some really great images. I'm going to show that we did it during a pre-shoot. We're also going to shoot some pictures here today in the classroom. So who is this for? Who needs to use this outdoor flash photography? Well, do you shoot sports? Are your kids playing soccer or doing skateboarding? Are you a portrait artist? Do you shoot portraits outside? Are you a wedding photographer? Do you do macro work? All of these things can benefit from a solid understanding of flash photography. Today's plan is all about kind of the tech, the approach, the technique. I want to simplify it. I want to make it easy for you. I want to show you how to control the light. A lot of people tell me that they are an available light photographer. And you know what that means? When you say you're an available light photographer, what that means is, I'm not too comfortable with using my flash outside. So I wanted to make you an available light photographer and a flash guru. So that's the plan for the day. Let me show you what the schedule is for the day. You can see here we've got basically 4 segments. The first segment is all about the setup and the gear. So what camera settings do you need? What type of equipment do you need? We're going to go through all of that. It's kind of the techie, gearhead segment of the day. Then we get to outdoor flash. We start talking about what does it look like to do on-camera flash? What does it look like to do off-camera flash? What does it mean to shoot on a sunny day versus a cloudy day? What are the approaches that you would take for each of those? Things like ISOs and softboxes, and do those change when the sun comes out versus when it's cloudy? The third segment of the day, we talk about ND filters. That stands for neutral density filters. So we talk about controlling the light through filtering. We also talk about high-speed sync, so shooting with a really fast shutter speed. I'll show you how we do that. We do some sports and action photography as well. So we'll do location portraiture, action photography in the 4th segment, and then we wrap up the day talking about macro. So if you like doing macro bugs and flowers, I'm going to show you some really simple ways to use your flashes for those scenarios as well. So we're going to start talking about setup and gear. And I've got a bunch of demo stuff to show you this morning. And I'm going to move through this fairly quickly. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on each of the items. I'm just going to basically call them out, talk about a trigger, give you a little bit of information on those triggers. But we ran this other class at Creative Live called Using Your First Flash, where I go into much more of the nitty-gritty detail. So I would also point you to that class if you want more information on this technology. Well, Let's talk about some terms first, some terminology, because I'm going to be throwing out a lot of terms today. So let's define some flash photography terms. First thing is user-defined light. When you're doing flash photography, you're the user. You are defining what that light is, what it looks like, how it behaves. So things like, are you shooting direct hard flash? Are you using a softbox or an umbrella? What's the position of the light? You're defining it. Versus an ambient light photographer or a natural light photographer, you're kind of working with what's there, right? You're working with the clouds, you're working with the sun. Nature is defining the light. So flash photography, you're in control. For this class, we're talking about strobes, so flashes. Another term for that is speed lights. So you're going to hear me saying those 3 things together: strobes, flash, speed lights. And then, this type of lighting is an instantaneous pulse of light. Pow. The light comes out of the flash and it's done. Compare that to an ambient type of light where it's continuous lighting, right? So the sun is continuous lighting. The lights in the studio right now, this is all continuous lighting. So we have to find a way to manage the continuous light with the pulse of light from the flash. Ambient light, it exists already. It's in the environment. Even at night, on a cloudy, moonless night, there's still a lot of times ambient light. It may be very faint and very dim, but you still are working with ambient light. And then, of course, during the daylight, there's a lot of natural light. You see it here in Washington, we get a lot of clouds, so you learn how to work with that real quick. Down south, Arizona, Texas, you get a lot of sun. So depending on where you live, you may have to work with different types of natural light. And then interior lighting. I know most of you shoot inside. I mean, we just do that. You shoot maybe a portrait of your kid in the kitchen, in the dining room, something like that. Well, you have to deal with the lights that are inside, the incandescents or the LEDs or the fluorescents. And then flash photography, we're learning how to combine those. We're combining the ambient with the flash, especially in the outdoors. In fact, I call it balancing. And that's what we're about today, is I'm going to teach all about balancing the light, building your exposure. You're going to hear that term from me probably 15, 20 times today, building the exposure. You build with, starting with the foundation is with the ambient light, and then you add your flash to that. So you got to think through, how much ambient do I want in this photo? How much flash do I want in the photo? There's never one answer. Sometimes you want the ambient light to be dim. Sometimes you want the ambient light to be bright. So what are our variables? The 4 common variables for this, for outdoor flash photography, are shutter speed, aperture, ISO, and then, of course, flash power. And, there's a million other things on your cameras these days. There's white balance, and, there's a bunch of other things that we have to think through. But really, those are the 4 main things. How fast is your shutter speed? How small or big is your aperture? How high or low is your ISO? And then how much oomph are you pumping out of that flash? So let's start talking about some gear. I'm a gearhead. I love gear. I love talking about gear. I don't like paying for gear, but once I have it, I feel good about it. So, but the truth is that you don't need a lot of gear to do really well. In fact, today, all the photos I took for the class today were taken with one single flash. So I just want to show you that you don't have to go out and buy 10 flashes. There's some other great Creative Live instructors who shoot with a lot of flashes. I want to show you today, just starting out, start with one. Okay, so let's talk about flashes. I'm going to walk over here to my gear table. And I'll just show a couple of kind of the high end and the low end of flashes, all right? In this hand, I have a $29 flash that I got from Amazon. The name of the company is Apperlite. I have no idea if they're even still in business, but it's 29 bucks. And the cool thing about this flash is that it's just as powerful. In other words, it puts out as much light as this flash. This is the SB910. This flash is not $29. This one's like, I don't even know. Well, is this one still current in the Nikon lineup? Well, the current one in the Nikon lineup is the SB5000, and that's like $500-ish, $500. So if all you need is a certain amount of power, well, $29 is going to get you here. So what am I getting by spending $500 on a flash? Well, you're getting full connectivity. You're getting the ability to trigger this thing wirelessly in the Nikon system, okay? You're getting full system compatibility. So this flash speaks with the camera speaks to the flash, no wires involved. And I don't need to buy any other type of triggers, which is cool. So I own a bunch of the Nikon flashes, and I think they're great. But starting out, you might just consider buying a $29 flash and then finding some way to trigger it. Now this flash I can trigger with just a pulse of light. It's called a slave. I can set this up to S1. There's a little thing in there. It's called S1. And almost any other flash that you would buy from Amazon or eBay in that price range has a slave mode. What that means is it's just going to pull. It's just going to fire when it sees a pulse of light. So nothing too fancy. This one, though, I can control from my camera. I can say, hey, flash, go a little brighter. Hey, flash, go a little darker. And I don't have to go approach the flash. I can stay back in my shooting position and not have to go to each of my flashes. So you can see there's advantages to spending more money, and of course there's advantages to spending less money. But I do want to point this out. Every photo I took for today's class and all the pre-shoots that you guys are going to see here in a little bit, I could have done with this flash just fine, the $29 flash, okay? So some other things to think about: power. Think about how much power the flash has. In terms of guide numbers, you want like a guide number of around 100. That's a good data point to have in your head. That's a decent amount of power. Anything low guide numbers, like in the 40s and 30s, they're not going to have enough power to do this outdoor flash photography. A low guide number like a 20 or 30 is going to be fine for macro, but not for portraiture, especially when you want to fill up an umbrella full of light and try to overpower the sun. So there's flashes. Oh, and then the last bullet item that I want to talk about is this high-speed sync. Is this flash able to do what's called high-speed sync? I'm going to teach you what high-speed sync is all about today. The $29 flash will not do high-speed sync, whereas this flash does do the high-speed sync. So, and we'll get to more of that as the day wears on. All right, how about camera bodies? Well, cameras are important, and camera bodies are not important. It's the same thing with the flash. You can do great work with the $29 flash, and you can do great work with a $400 camera. You just have to make sure everything works well together. My encouragement to you as you're looking for cameras is to get a camera that has a relatively high shutter sync speed. Shutter sync speed. Make sure that the shutter sync speed is at least a 2/50th of a second. 1/250th, okay? Some of the lower end cameras only sync to like 1/200th of a second, or maybe like 1/180th of a second. Those little bumps in shutter speed improvement help a lot when you're doing outdoor flash. And we're going to talk about shutter speed sync later today. I've got a full tutorial on that. So the highest sync speed, that's important. Can the camera do rear curtain sync? Rear curtain. And I'll show you this later today. We're doing some outdoor sports and action photography. I've got people moving, and you want some motion blur. You want the blur to be behind the movement of the action, and then fire the flash at the end of the blur. That's how you get this really cool trailing effect. You can't do that with what's called front curtain sync. So make sure that your camera body has the ability to do rear curtain sync. Does your camera have the ability to do TTL flash control through the lens metering? Hopefully, yes. Most cameras do these days. And then, does the camera support wireless flash control? Canon does, Nikon does, Sony, there's some wireless flash controls for Sony. Some of the Fuji systems allow it. So just, if you're into doing this wireless flash stuff, try to get these 4 bullet items met with whatever camera you're purchasing. All right, next, lenses. I like f2.8. A lot of people like f2.8 lenses, but the deal with f2.8 lenses is they're somewhat expensive, right? So if you get like a 24-70 f2.8, that's going to be a $2,000 purchase, somewhere in that range. If you get the 70-200 f2.8, that's like a $2,400 to $3,000 purchase. So lenses can be expensive, and I want to point out that you don't need to buy super expensive lenses to do great outdoor flash photography. On purpose for this class, I'm using a kit lens. So I've got my Nikon. I'm a Nikon shooter, so all my stuff is Nikon, but Canon has these as well, like the 18 to 55, the 18 to 105, the 18 to 200s. Those types of lenses will work just fine, and that's what I'll be using for today, is this 18 to 105 lens. So what's the advantage of going to f2.8? Narrow depth of field. When you do portraiture, a lot of times you want that background to be blurry and soft, and f2.8 basically allows you to do that. Whereas this lens, the range on this lens is f3.5 to f5.6, and you don't necessarily get that nice bokeh, that nice blurry background. But for portraits, if you keep the background far away, like you'll see in a lot of the examples that I showed today, as long as that background's like 50 feet away or 100 feet away, shooting at f5.6 is just fine. So what's my main point on lenses? Buy f2.8 if you need it, but you can get by starting out with a kit lens, and you can do great work. As I always tell people, it's not always about the camera or the lens. The most important thing is right here. And that's why you guys are all here today. You're here to learn. And once you get this nailed down, then the gear really does start to matter. All right, let's talk about triggering the flashes. Oh my goodness. We are living in the golden age of flash triggers. Never in my career, I've been a professional photographer for about 20 years now, and never in my career have I seen this many options available to us to trigger flashes. So there's OEM, and what I mean by OEM is original equipment manufacturers. So Canon and Nikon, they actually sell devices that are Nikon branded and Canon branded that allow you to trigger things wirelessly. So the Nikon wireless system, the Canon wireless system, they're excellent and they work really, really well. I highly recommend them, but they ain't cheap. They're fairly expensive. So you need to think about, when I'm doing outdoor flash photography, do I want to be wireless or wired? Well, if you're wired, you're going to be using something like this, okay? This is a TTL cable, through the lens metering cable. All that really means is it's dedicated. It tells the flash everything it needs to know. And that basically goes on the flash like this, and then it mounts on the camera like that. So the positive here is that it's a rock solid data communication. You're never gonna like drop the flash out. It's every single time it's gonna fire, and it's gonna do what it's supposed to, and it won't fail. What's the downside? You know, you can't get very far away, so then you start daisy chaining these cables together, and I do that. I have a number of these cables, and you can daisy chain them, but here's another thing, and more importantly, you're gonna pull over your equipment. You're gonna knock it over. I have done this so many times when I've cabled up, is you just move over, and you're not even thinking about it, and the whole thing falls over, and you break your softbox, or you break your flash. So I like cabled when things are fixed and I sandbag everything down and I'm kind of in the studio, but I think outdoor flash photography, wireless is the way to go. So you've got the OEM, you've got the Nikon and the Canon. Every new generation has a little bit different way. The new Nikon system uses radio trigger. Canons use radio trigger, and I think radio trigger is a much more reliable way to go than the traditional optical trigger. So Nikon has an optical trigger system, and that's, just to talk a little bit of techie stuff here, that's the previous like SB900, the SB700, the SB800. Those older flashes were only optical trigger, and those required line of sight. In other words, you had to have a direct line of sight to the flash and the camera. And even then, I got about maybe like a 90% success rate on a good day. That means 10% of my flashes, or 10% of my photos didn't work properly. So I really like the radio. It's very reliable. There's other brands. We were talking this morning about Pocket Wizards. Pocket Wizards are radio trigger. They're excellent. And Pocket Wizard now has a TTL controlled system. It's very good, very reliable. It works with the Canon, it works with the Nikon, and I'm sure it works with the Fujis and the Sonys as well. I highly recommend them, but as you guys know, as we've already talked, even the Pocket Wizards aren't cheap. You know, just for the little radio triggers, you're hundreds of dollars. All right, so what's some other, I've got two other options for you that will actually save you a ton of money. Okay, first are these. I bought these off of Amazon, and it's a Yangnuo. There we go, Yangnuo. This is a radio trigger. It's not TTL, and I can't control the remote flash from this, but it will trigger it with a radio signal. And I've tested it out hundreds of feet away. It works just fine. And this only cost me about $40 for this little setup. So if you have multiple flashes, you'll need one of these little transceivers for every flash, and then one for the camera. So it's $40 for two, so they work out to be about 20 bucks a piece. A very inexpensive way to go. And it's reliable. I've been using it for a while. I'm really happy with them. Then this thing, this is the least expensive way to go. This is just an optical slave. This little, we used to call them beans. There's all kinds of terms for these in the industry. This just will trigger your big flash when it sees a pulse of light. So it's a dumb trigger. We've also called these slaves in the past. They just have no ability to control. They just receives a pulse of light, causes the flash to fire. Like 10 bucks, 12 bucks. So it's a very inexpensive way to go, but it is line of sight, okay? It has to see the originating flash. So there's just some high-level discussion on triggers. For today in this class, I'll be using the Nikon system, but I just want to make this point again that today's class isn't about Nikon. Today's class, whatever camera system you've got, Canon, Sony, Fuji, Nikon, whatever, today's class is going to work for you. So I'm not going to really go into the details of the Nikon stuff.
A question had come in from Anoop about, are there any electronic shutter cameras where there is no limitation on shutter speed when used with a flash?
Yeah, and so that's a great question, and I don't have a really great answer on that. I haven't spent any time right now with doing flash photography with electronic shutter cameras. So what he's talking about is basically a DSLR has two shutter curtains. One shutter curtain opens, it then takes the picture, and then the other shutter curtain closes behind it, and then they both reset. And your flash basically has to fire when those two curtains are out of the way. Because if the flash fires while another curtain's coming up behind it, you only get like half the scene exposed by flash. Well, an electronic shutter has no curtain. So technically, you can fire a flash at any shutter speed, and it's all going to be exposed. So I hate to say it, but I don't have a really great answer. And I'll say that's forthcoming. We're thinking about doing some other classes on that topic specifically.
Perfect. And let's see. One more, and this is a sort of specific question, but we can talk in general. For Carrie D, who said, can you tell us again, can the Nikon SB910 trigger that $29 flash? Can they be used together at the same time?
Yeah, great question, Carrie D. And the answer is yes. I use all of my flashes, my inexpensive eBay and Amazon flashes and my expensive Nikon flashes. I use them together all the time. The key is, and the difficulty is understanding what technology is going to trigger what flash. And once you get that kind of, what I'll call that minimum requirement set, then all flashes have to meet that minimum requirement. So what I'll do is that inexpensive flash, the $29 flash, I set that one for slave mode, S1, we'll call it. I remember that's the menu thing called S1. Okay, so now it's going to fire when it sees a single pulse of light. Okay, that means my SB910 now has to either fire off a single pulse of light or it has to receive a single pulse of light if it's a remote flash. Does that make sense? So everything has to kind of be all slave one mode, and Nikon allows that to happen. Alternatively, I could put a different type of radio trigger, like those Yongnuos. I could put that on the bottom of that $29 flash, and then that on the bottom of my Nikon, and then now they will all fire based on that system. So you just have to make sure all the flashes are using the same communication technology. Super question. Batteries are the linchpin of your flash system. Don't skimp on buying cheap batteries, okay? The worst thing, and I've done a ton of location photography in my career, the worst thing is going on set and you take 5 or 6 shots as setup shots and then your batteries die. And your subject is now on set and they're paying you money for this, and you're like, hold on, go over, change the batteries, and then you go out and you get another 5 or 10, 20 shots out of them, and then they fail. So buy nice, good batteries. I recommend buying nickel metal hydrides, and whatever the current top brand is, I buy those. I like Eneloops, E-N-E-L-O-O-P. You can buy those kind of at the big box stores. You guys all know those big box stores. I also use a company called, I've just lost the name of the company where I bought them, but these are called Imedion, I-M-E-D-I-O-N, Imedions. They're very good. I've been using these for a couple years. And then I buy a nice battery charger, a microprocessor-controlled battery charger, because I want my batteries to be in top performance. These are the engines to your flash, so make sure your engines are tuned up and charged. I always keep them topped off. Don't skimp on your batteries. Let's talk about equipment, flash stands. A big thing, or a big part of your outdoor flash photography involves the light stands. Light stands are really important and not important at all. I mean, no one's ever going to go look at your light stand and go, oh, you've got a XYZ light stand. No, the most important thing is functionality. So I'm going to I'm just gonna walk over here, and I'll pull this one out. This one first. So this is like one of the first light stands I ever bought. It's a Manfrotto, very good. I paid like $30 for it. So I'm like, ooh, it's a low cost, inexpensive light stand. It's super lightweight, it folds down. But look how tall it is. Look how high it is. Okay, so I'm 6 feet tall. This light stand only goes to the top of my head. Now, if I put an umbrella on here, I can't get the umbrella any higher than 6 feet high. And that's a problem because if I want to create a certain look or if I want it to be like a rim light behind the subject, I can't get any higher than this. So 6-foot light stands are okay if the person is sitting down on a stool, but that's not okay for outdoor flash photography. You're gonna be on uneven ground. You know, your subject's gonna be standing down here and you're gonna be up there and you're like, I need more height. So if you're gonna buy one light stand, don't get a 6-footer, okay? Rather, get something like this, and this is probably 8 or 9 footer. I recommend 8 to 9 foot light stands as your starting point. So if I lift this up, right now this is at 6 feet, by the way. If I lift this up, oh, sorry crew, I just unplugged the video feed. We'll fix it in a little bit. But now you can see I've got some flexibility, especially for really tall people. I can put this behind the subject. I can get the rim light. So what is that, 8 feet-ish, maybe? So get a nice tall light stand, and it's gonna weigh more. And it's gonna cost a little bit more, but in the long run, you'll be very happy you purchased the higher quality light stand, heavier duty. And then I've got some other light stands here in the back. I won't pull those out, but those are really tall. Those are like 18 to 20 foot. And I think they're too much for the beginning photographer. If you're doing a lot of pro work, then yeah, get the 20-foot tall light stand. But to use those big light stands, you need big sandbags. You need maybe a crew to help you set them up. So start with the 8-footer, you'll be happy. Oh, so next, let's talk about the umbrella brackets. How do these things all connect together? Well, this is a light stand umbrella bracket. Very inexpensive. You can get these for probably $10 to $12 at any camera stores. I like the metal ones, so the metal ones cost more. Why? Well, I like the metal ones because they're more durable and they can take a heavier weight. How this works, let's see. I'll pull this one out. This one makes sense to pull out. Here we go. Does that work for the cameras? So we've got the light stand. This thing just basically goes right there on top. There's a brass stud, okay? And then right there on top, I connect whatever lighting source I need. So I've connected, in this case, a softbox. Or if I need to put an umbrella in there, the umbrella goes right through this shaft. Very simple. So if your light stand, let's just say a nice light stand is going to be $60, $70. These umbrella brackets, a metal one is going to cost you $20, $25. So for about $100, you have a really durable, great outdoor flash photography stand. Speedlight speed ring. This is called a speed ring here. That's a good term to learn. Every different manufacturer, like Profoto in this case, they have a different style of speed ring. This is the ring. Why is it a speed ring? Well, they came up with the term, I think, just to indicate that it's speedy, fast. I don't know. But this, like the Profoto, one of the reasons I love the Profoto is because I can rotate it around, get different orientations. And then your flash basically mounts right here and shines right into the equipment. So Speedlight speed ring. If you're shooting an umbrella, you don't need a speed ring. All you need is this little bracket, okay? Alrighty. Multiple flashes. Sometimes we need multiple flashes, especially with outdoor flash photography. In that case, I got this little thing. So it's a little metal bracket. You can find it on Amazon, eBay, your favorite camera store. They all sell these. And this basically allows me to mount 2 flashes on there. And instead of this brass stud, the one on here goes in. And now I can mount 2 flashes into whatever equipment I'm using, into my umbrella, into my softbox, whatever. Sometimes you need more than 1 flash. And this is an easy way to do it. Total cost of this setup was $15, so it's not very expensive. Modifiers. Well, to do great flash work, you need to have some type of flash modifier. I like umbrellas, and I like softboxes. There's a ton of other stuff you can buy. You can buy octas, you can buy beauty dishes, you can buy all of these other things. But the best bang for the buck is going to be, number one, an umbrella. You can buy an umbrella very inexpensively, and it'll do great work for you. Once you graduate from the umbrella, I think your next purchase should be a softbox. All right, so I'm going to do this in reverse order because the softbox is already here. This is a softbox. It's a 3 foot on one edge, 3 feet, and then 2 feet on the other way. I think you should get a minimum of like a 24-inch to 36-inch softbox. Anything smaller is just too small. It's not going to be great for outdoor flash photography, okay? So get a 3-footer. These are not cheap, especially Profoto. But Profoto makes the best stuff on the market. That's my opinion. If you want, you can find other softboxes that are less money, probably around $150 to $200 for a decent quality softbox. A Profoto softbox, multiple hundreds of dollars, $300 to $400. Let's talk about umbrellas. You should get and purchase an umbrella that is at least 30 inches or bigger. So how big is this one? They call this a medium. So this is a Profoto medium. But I'd guess that's about 40 inches. Bigger is mo better. Always, bigger is better. And you can quote me on that. Bigger is mo better. Silver. Why silver? Well, for outdoor flash photography, you need as much light from the flash to shine onto your subject. Because you're fighting with that sun, you're fighting with the clouds. So I like silver for outdoor flash photography. For indoors, I typically use white. But outdoor, I've gone to the silver.
41 inches.
41 inches. Cool. We have it from the crew. It's a 41-incher. And I think that's about minimum. It's kind of I think it's a little bit small. Here is another Profoto. It's white. This is like a 32-inch, okay? And I think that's just too small, especially when you can't get really close. And then I always have big ones. I love big umbrellas. This is a 7-footer. It's gigantic. Maybe it's a 6-footer. Yeah, it's probably 6-footer. So it seems silly to go with stuff this big, but the more you do this work, the more you realize you like the big umbrellas. You can put them farther away from the subject, and the light just washes over the subject. It's really fantastic. So that's umbrellas, and that's soft boxes. Octas, so octaboxes, you maybe have heard of that term. They're octagonal. It's just another way to do a softbox. Octas are even more expensive, and I have a couple of them, but the truth is I use soft boxes for the majority of my portraiture and my outdoor people work. So there's modifiers. Yeah, we talked about umbrellas. I kind of covered all of these, but I like the silver for outdoors. You guys have probably seen this. There's a couple of type of umbrellas. There's a type you reflect off of, like this. There's other umbrellas you can actually shoot through. They're white, they're translucent. And people ask me all the time, which one should I buy? I'm like, yes. None, they all work. They all work great. And so just find something that works for your style. But I think if you're focusing on outdoors, maybe start with the silver. And then we already kind of talked about these, but get a 24-inch or larger softbox and get something, the Speedlight speed ring that works with your little flash. You can buy softboxes designed for studio lights. They're not designed for your Speedlight. So make sure the speed ring works with your flash. Reflectors, you gotta have a reflector. Okay, a reflector basically doubles your lights for almost free. Well, not quite. 20, 30 bucks, you get a nice reflector. So I have, this is a 5-in-1, okay? And so 5-in-1, meaning it's got white, it's got silver, and then if you unzip it, there are two other colors inside. There's the gold, and then there's the black, which is a light absorber. Sometimes we want one side of the face to be even darker. And then you've got this, which allows the light to shine through. And this works as a scrim. A scrim meaning it prevents light, or it softens the light coming onto the subject. So get a 5-in-1. They're a little more expensive. Get a high quality unit that won't break down after a year's worth of use. I've made all the same mistakes you all have made. Oh, that one's on eBay and it's only $7.99, and then you end up paying for it at the worst time, at your first wedding shoot, or something like that. And you're like, oh no, it's all falling apart on me. I had one where all the gold shedded off. So I'm photographing this bride. I remember I was photographing the bride, and the gold was like falling off, and it was landing on the bride's dress. And I'm like, oh, this is not good. So spend a little bit of money on these. This is a 42-inch. I recommend 42 or larger for your reflectors. Again, bigger is better. And when I say 5-in-1s are most flexible, I don't mean like flexible like they're all bendy. I mean flexible like most useful, okay? Next, I think the next one is a scrim. Yeah, scrims. Okay. We don't suffer from too much sun where I live. We get a lot of cloudy days. But when it is sunny, that harsh sunlight can be very, the look in the final photo does not look good to have really harsh sunlight on the subject. So I like using scrims. So I just showed you this 5-in-1 has a scrim in it. Great. That works for little kids, 4 and under, maybe 3 and under. But if you're trying to scrim or block the light from a full-grown person, you need a bigger unit. Okay, and this is made by Lastolight, but there's like everything else here, we're living in the golden era of flash gear. You can find this stuff from lots of different manufacturers. Try not to hurt myself as I open this. Okay, this is just basically a translucent white scrim. You can see my hand there. It blocks, I'd say, at least 50% of the light coming from the sun. And typically how this would work is you would use a little bracket. I actually have one. So you're going to need another light stand. This is the bracket here. That bracket goes right here onto the light stand. And then it clips onto the scrim like this. And now it'll just stand up, and you can actually move it up as high as you need to. If you get a second one of these brackets and you have 2 light stands, then you can put them overhead. You can put them overhead of the subject, and you can block out sun at high noon, something like that. So these are very helpful. This is a 6-foot scrim. It's like 70 or 72 inches long. And this is the minimum size scrim I think you should buy if you're serious about outdoor flash photography. You can also use it as a reflector. You can shoot light onto it and bounce back to the subject. But these, I use this all the time. I even use it as a backdrop sometimes. Just putting the subject in front of it and using it as a simple backdrop. So very flexible. All right, so that's the gear. That's the gear techie stuff. And I didn't go into too much detail on each of them, but I just kind of gave you a little bit of an overview on the type of equipment you might need. At a bare minimum, you need one stand, you need one flash umbrella bracket, and you need an umbrella, okay? So that's $120 for really good gear. And if you shop hard, you can find what I just described there for less than $75, okay? So you don't have to spend a ton of money. And most of the photos I took today are using that basic kit that I just talked about.
A lot of people are asking about how you deal with this gear outside when it's windy. So what are some additional gear things that you might bring with you?
Great. Sandbags are fantastic. I love using sandbags, but if you're a one-person show, and most of the people watching today, you're not going to have an assistant or a team of people schlepping your gear with you. You're going to have to figure out how to do this on your own. And lugging around a sandbag is not fun. Lugging around 5 sandbags is not fun. So I've come up with a great solution. I'm going to walk over here and grab my camera bag. Oh, you know what? I forgot my little strap. But I have these little nylon straps. Maybe I've got one in here. I usually travel with a nylon strap in my camera bag. Ah, I do. Woohoo! I wasn't even a Boy Scout growing up, but I'm always prepared. So I just have a little nylon strap like this, okay? And what I do is I loop it through the top hook on my camera bag, and then I find a little knob or something else on my light stand, and I just loop that onto my light stand and hang the camera bag from the light stand. And that usually solves the problem. And typically when I'm shooting by myself, I only have one light stand. If I have two light stands, well then I'll take, I don't know, what some people do is they take a little ditty bag. I'm a rock climber, and so we call them little ditty bags, a little nylon sack. And we'll take that empty, and then on site we'll find rocks and throw a bunch of rocks in there and hang that from the light stand. Totally great question. So the next segment here is I want to start showing you some photos. Now that we've talked about the gear and the tech, I want to start going through the camera settings. What do we need to know about ISO, shutter speed, aperture? So before this class, actually last week, we spent some time outdoors and we did a bunch of pre-shoots out in the field. And throughout the rest of the day, we have these pre-shoot videos to show you. It's basically me saying the same thing I say here in the classroom, but I'm doing it outside on location. So let's go into our first one, which is all about camera settings and flash settings. And then when we come back, we'll ask questions and I'll answer those questions. Here we go. You can see we've got a cloudy day. So what's going through my mind is I'm trying to understand what ISO I want to be at, what aperture I want to be at, and what shutter speed I want to be at. So in the studio, a lot of times you're maybe trying to exclude the ambient light. You know, you're trying to exclude the fluorescent lights or the incandescent lights in the studio. But out here, when you're shooting outside on location, a lot of times you want to incorporate the ambient light. And because it's a cloudy day, I might want to actually use a little bit higher ISO. So before I go into all of the settings of the camera, let's set the ISO. And on this camera, this is a Nikon D500. I'm just going to push the ISO button here and then rotate my thumb dial. And you can see I'm changing my ISO between 100 to 200. I think outside right now, I'm going to go with an ISO 200 as a starting point. As we shoot later on today, I might go up to 400. We'll see how it goes. Okay, so let's go through and talk about the other camera settings. One of my favorite things to do is basically go around the camera body, pushing the buttons that pertain to my exposures and my shots. So I usually just start down here in the lower left and work my way around. Let's do that. Over here on the left side, there's really nothing on this camera to adjust. On some cameras, you'll find your ISO button, you'll find your white balance button up here, actually. So let's go and push the mode button. The mode button changes between program mode, shutter priority, aperture priority, and manual mode. For most of my location work, when I'm outside, I like to shoot in manual exposure mode. It gives me full control. It gives me the ability to say, no, I just want to adjust aperture now without shutter speed changing, or vice versa, okay? So next is white balance. Well, it's a cloudy day, so I'm probably going to choose cloudy white balance if I'm concerned about the ambient light. But you know, this is a flash class, and we're thinking about flash, the color of flash. So I'm actually going to choose flash white balance. In fact, let me show it on this screen here. It's a little bit bigger. So white balance there, and there's a little icon in the lower right-hand part of the screen. It's a little lightning bolt. That stands for flash white balance. Okay. Next, I'm going to go back up here on top because that's where the button is. The qual button, well, that's the image quality. I like shooting raw. Raw is where it's at as far as I'm concerned. It gives me a lot of flexibility later on in software to adjust my exposures. The next button here is my metering mode. For most of my metering, I use matrix metering or multi-pattern metering, and I'll use that today, and I'll explain as the day goes on why that's important. All right, next we have this dial here. This is my shooting mode dial. In other words, how many frames per second. right here, I'm gonna set it for S for single frame rate. This camera shoots at 10 frames per second, and there's no way, if I was in continuous high, there's no way the camera could, or the flashes could keep up with me. So I'm gonna stay in single frame rate. In other words, one shot, and then kind of reframe, take another shot. All right, now let's go back over to here. ISO, we already talked about that. That's a very important one. We'll be changing ISO as the day goes on. And then here we've got exposure compensation. And this basically, this button here adjusts the brightness of the background. But I'm gonna be in manual exposure mode. Well, how do you adjust the brightness of the background in manual exposure mode? Well, you just adjust your shutter speed or you adjust your aperture. So I don't really need to be using the exposure compensation button. Rather, what I'm doing now is I'm just checking to make sure it's actually zeroed out, and it is. It's at 0.0. All right. Now, the next things we've got to be thinking about is aperture and shutter speed. And to show those, I'll go to the big screen on the back so it's a little bit easier to see. Here you can see I'm at f5 and I'm at 1/80th of a second. And you can also see on my exposure line, it says I'm really overexposed. You know, I'm at 1, 2, 3. I'm 3 stops overexposed. So I need to adjust my shutter speed and aperture down to where it's kind of zeroed out. And now you'll see I'm at f5 at a 6/40th of a second. And that doesn't make sense really for flash photography, as we'll explain in just a little bit when we talk about flash shutter speed synchronization. So for now, maybe if I go something like f8 at a 2/50th or so, that's about right for a starting exposure. A lot of people want to start with the flash when we're talking about flash photography. It's like, oh, I'm outside, I'm doing flash work, I'm gonna start with the flash settings. But that's the wrong approach. Really what we need to do is we need to start with the camera body, get all of that squared away, and then once that's ready to go, then we start going to the flash. So let's do that now. All right, so I'm using the Nikon system, but what I want to point out here is that everything I'm going to show you is really translatable to Canon or Fuji or Sony. Most of these technologies that I'll talk through have analogs in other with other camera gear. So this here is a Nikon SB5000, and when I turn it on, I'm going to turn it on to the remote setting. All right. And today I'll be using a mixture of different types of triggering technologies, but for this example, I'm just going to show you that I'm going to trigger it with the Nikon Creative Lighting System, or the Nikon Wireless System. So this button here, when I push this toggles between different wireless remote modes, okay? And for this situation, I'm just going to go here to remote, and it says Remote TTL. The next thing I need to be concerned about is the channel and the group. Okay, so you can see here I'm in channel 5, group A. So in my camera body, I also have to set my camera body so it's speaking to channel 5, group A. The next thing I'm going to check is make sure that it's linked up. That's what this little green light is here on top. It's linked. And if I pull my camera up, you can see that the transmitter here also has a green light. So I'm linked up, everything's synchronized. And that's it for the flash. You know, just make sure you have full batteries and you're ready to go. All of the other settings in these wireless remote systems happen from the transmitter. And in this case, the transmitter is the camera body. So let's go now into the settings in the menu to talk about the flash setup. So I'm in what's called the photo shooting menu, and then I scroll down here to flash control. I go into that menu and I set it for the wireless flash options. You can see I've set it for radio flash control. Remote flash control, this guy, the remote flash, what do I want that to be? Well, there's a couple of different options. In this case, I want it to be in the group flash settings, okay? So this will be one flash in a group. Next is the group flash options. So remember here, we show we're on group A. So group A, and here it says I'm in TTL mode for this flash, which is fantastic. This is where I want to be to start off. But as we'll see throughout the day, sometimes I want to be going down to manual flash mode. And then to change the power of that flash, I can go up or down with my multi-selector. So like this would be manual output at 1/8 power, okay? But for now, we'll leave it at group A, TTL, And then if I need to change the compensation or the brightness of that flash, I just basically go up and down from here. And then to set that in place, you push the OK button, and the OK, pow, we're good to go. And then radio remote flash info, well, basically it just says, hey, that's an SB5000. And if I had more flashes in the setup, it'd show me different flashes, and I can kind of control each of those independently. So anyways, when you do flash settings, the flash settings are very limited. Really what's happening is you're just telling that flash what you want it to do. Do you want to go manual output? Do you want to go TTL? And that's it. The flash just kind of sits there and does its thing. So there's camera settings and flash settings. Well, let me just summarize the most important aspects. All flash photography begins with the camera. Okay? So even though we go out and you buy this $29 flash or this $500 flash, it doesn't matter. You should always base it with the camera. So the important things are setting your ISO. Most of the time we're dealing with a little speed light, one single speed light, and we don't have a lot of power. So I would bias my ISOs in general a little bit higher, okay? 200s, 400s, somewhere in that range. But you're going to see it throughout the other videos that we produced here. A lot of times I'm even at 100, sometimes I'm at 50. So there's no good answer for ISO. You're going to use the right ISO for your situation, for your environment. Apertures, for this type of flash photography, I'm always between f2.8 and f8. Okay? Very, very rarely am I going to f16 or f22. The reason why is these flashes just don't have enough power to pump through that little aperture. So that's a downside to using these small flashes. How would you shoot f16, f22? You have to have 2 flashes, 3 flashes, 4 flashes. So if you need more depth of field, for example, if you're photographing an automobile, let's say your neighbor has a 1957 Chevy and he just painted it and he wants you to photograph it, and you need from the front bumper to the back of the vehicle in focus, well, you have to be at f16. The only way to do that is to bring in more flashes to the party, okay? And maybe even flashes on different light stands, you know, through the length of the car. So in general, if you're using one flash, stick around f4 to f5.6, somewhere in that range, okay? Shutter speed, well, we're limited, right? We're limited to 1/250th of a second, or whatever your camera's maximum sync speed is. So for the camera I have here today, that's 1/250th. I have other Nikon cameras that are 1/200th, and I know a lot of Canon cameras are limited to 1/200th. Some Canons go up to 1/250th. So just keep that in mind. Whatever your shutter speed is, initially, you can't go above 1/250th, and you'll see why in a little bit. And then shutter sync. On each camera, you have the synchronization mode. Normal sync, rear curtain sync, red eye reduction modes. These are synchronization modes. You have to set that in generally for rear sync, because if there's any movement, you want the blur to be behind the action, behind the activity, okay? Well, how about flash settings? In my mind, even though our flashes these days, especially like the $500 Nikon and Canon flashes, they have 5 to 7 exposure modes on them. TTL, TTL-BL, RPT, GN, manual, that's 5, and I know there's A, there's AA. So you've got all of these different flash exposure modes. I think there's only 2 that you need to worry about, TTL and manual, okay? And most of the stuff that I do, I use manual. I use TTL when I shoot an event. I just shot an event, a fundraising event this weekend, and I shot TTL because I'm moving around, right? I'm photographing here, I'm photographing there, the light's bright, the light's dark. TTL allows you to do that quickly. But when I do this outdoor portraiture, I'm almost always in manual because the light stand is there and I've got my subject there, you know, the flower's not moving, you know. So when things are stationary and I'm on stands, I tend to go with manual mode. Pretty simple. Flash settings are easy. 2 options. Flash power, that's the next thing. In TTL mode, we're dealing with, see, TTL is a little bit different. TTL is through the lens metering. And what the camera's trying to do is trying to make the flash make a medium brightness exposure. Middle gray, you've heard of that term before? Or 18% gray. That's kind of what the flash is trying to do. Make that exposure so it's middle of the road. Well, middle of the road is, well, it's middle of the road. And sometimes you want it brighter and sometimes you want it darker. So in TTL mode, you go +1. +1 means one stop more than middle gray. -1 means one stop less than middle gray. So typically, for outdoor flash photography, you've got what I call the key light. And the key light is Del Sol, the sun, okay? The sun is the key light. Your flash most of the time is the fill light. So the fill is almost never as bright as the key. So almost always when I'm using TTL, my fill starts out at like a -1. It's just a good kind of starting point. And as you'll see in all these videos that we produced, I'm changing the power all the time. But I generally start my outdoor flash at about a -1 when I'm using TTL. How about manual mode? Well, manual is different. Manual, there is no metering from the camera. You're doing it. It's manual. So you're actually deciding, you're like turning the volume dial. 0, all the way up to maximum. So what is maximum? Well, all of these flashes have a maximum power output of 1/1. That means 100% power, full power. So 1/2. So if this is 1/1, half power is half of the brightness. 1/4, 1/8, 1/16, 32nd. So you're controlling the power based on whatever the full dump is, the full power output. And as I say again, you might need 2 or more flashes. Like if you're maxed out at 1/1, or if you're even in TTL mode and you're at like +2 or +3 and you're like, oh, it's still not pumping out enough light. I need more power. The way you get more power is more flashes. So before I get to the next section is building your exposure. Let me just see if there's any quick questions on camera settings or flash settings.
So when you're shooting in certain places, there's really deep shadows. On the video, you said to expose your camera first. How important is it to expose to those shadows or those highlights, depending on your environment, without considering the flash?
Yeah, good. So you're going to see, in fact, I'm so happy you asked your question now because it's the perfect segue to our next video. And the next video is all about building your exposure. So the way I like to work, and again, this is one man's opinion, and I know all those out there in the internet land, you may have a different approach to this, but the way I work is I start with the ambient light exposure. So I take my pictures first with no flash, and I look. All of our cameras have a screen that has a blinky screen. It shows you the blown out highlights. So I'm looking, for example, on the shoulder of the photo. Am I blowing out the shoulder? Or here on the forehead, before I even add flash, am I blowing anything out? So a lot of times I will set my exposure so I get no blinkies or no blown out highlights. All right, that's my base exposure, my ambient exposure. Then I add the flash in to fill in those shadows. So is that really what you're asking?
Yeah, and also just considering, backgrounds and like off subject.
Yeah, so like, is the background in the shade?
Right.
So this happens all the time. In fact, one of the photos I'm going to show when I show shooting in the sun, the background was actually in the shadow. And that's a different exposure overall than if the background's in direct sun. And so there's no easy answer for you other than, maybe the best answer I have for you is what is your artistic desire for that photo? Do you want the background to be darker, to make the photo look a little bit more moody, a little more heavy? Do you want that background to be brighter and airier, to be a high-key photo? If so, that's where you set that base exposure, okay? And then your flash just fills in from there. So I know that wasn't a specific answer, but it's really about your artistic decision.
Sure.
How do you want it to look?
Cool, thanks.
Let me just do one question.
Okay.
This is from Ralph Soma, who's wondering, is there sort of a consideration in terms of the largest size softbox or umbrella perhaps that will work efficiently with just one speed light before it gets too big for that power?
Yeah, great. When I first started out, like everybody else here, I bought a softbox and an umbrella. because everyone told me you need to have a softbox and umbrella. So I bought an umbrella. It was like this big, and I bought a softbox that was like this big, because it was only $13 at the local camera store. And I was like, oh, cool. And no problem. Your flash can fill all those up. And then I got this thought in my mind, like, oh, if I get a big softbox, then I have to get big lights because those big lights will fill the softbox. Well, what I've found over the years is all of my big, huge honking stuff works just great with my little speed lights. Here's the thing. You just have to make sure, I'm going to walk over this way, camera folks, so you can see. You just have to make sure that your flash fills the entire umbrella. So in this case, when this flash fires, you're going to, the angle of coverage will only actually go out to about here. So how do I fill the interior of this umbrella? Great solution. These little diffusion domes that you get for free with your $500 flash. This little plastic thing, it's worth its weight in gold. You just put that on there, and now what that does is it causes the light to go everywhere and fill up the interior. And the same thing goes for softboxes. If you use these little diffusion domes, the light will actually shine to all corners of the softbox.